my channel, The Fancy Hat Lady Reads. I'm wearing one of my fancy Booktube hats, and I know it's a month past the middle of the year at this point, but I'm not considering it too late, maybe the last possible moment, but not too late to do the mid-year book Freakout tag for 2017. Now, when I started this channel, I thought I was going to want to do a lot of tag videos, and then I just never did any tags. And then recently, in the last few months, I've been tagged in a bunch of things by various people that I really want to do, but those tags have sort of ended up in a backlog for me because I haven't worked tags into like my regular filming schedule yet, so I keep having to procrastinate them. But this, I feel like the beginning of August is my last chance to film the mid-year book Freakout tag, so I'm gonna do it. And then hopefully I'll get to some of the other ones in the next few weeks or so. So this tag was co-created several years ago by ReadLikeWildfire and Ellie from Earl Books. I was tagged by Sylvia K. I'll link the creators as well as Sylvia's video down below. Now there are a couple different versions of the list of questions that I've seen for this tag. I think because it was co-created by two different people and then it's had various iterations over the years. I am going to do the same version that Sylvia did because she's the one who tagged me. These are all questions pertaining to your reading for the first half of the year. I am counting July because that's already happened, so this is for the first 7 months of the year for me. And I'm going to hopefully run through these pretty quickly. I'm not going to stop and talk unless I have things to talk about. The first question is best book you've read so far in 2017. For me, this is hands down Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. Number 2 is the best sequel you've read in 2017, and this for me has to be a tie between The Girl Who Soared Over Fairyland and Cut the Moon in Two by Catherine M. Valenti, which is the 3rd book in the Fairyland series, and Binti Home by Nydia Corafor. This is the sequel to Binti. It's the 2nd book in this planned trilogy, and I cannot choose between these two because they are so different you just can't compare them. I've loaned out my copy of this, which is why I have a picture up here right now. A new release you haven't read yet but want to is going to be The Refrigerator Monologues by Catherine M. Valenti. Your most anticipated release for the second half of the year. This is another tie for me between Wild Beauty by Anna Marie McLemore and The Glasstown Game by Catherine M. Valenti, which is her new middle grade that's coming out in September. My biggest disappointment of the year so far has been The Once and Future King. This is my biggest disappointment in a really long time. This is actually my first 1-star rating since I started Booktube. This book and my favorite book of the year so far, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, were both such massive multi-month fantasy reading endeavors for me, and I happened to finish them both in the same month, so I think I'm actually going to do a sort of double discussion video where I talk about how much I loved one and hated the other, because it would just be too much to try to wrap them up in the same wrap-up. My biggest surprise is going to be a graphic novel that I read during the Getting Graphic readathon, and this is Hilda and the Troll by Luke Pearson. So this I did not go into with very high expectations because it's only like a 40-page graphic novel and it's for kids, but I was thoroughly and totally charmed. Favorite new author? This can be either a debut author or an author who is new to you. For this, I'm going to go with a new to me author because although her books had been on my TBR for a while, I had not actually read anything by N.K. Jemisin until this year when I read the 5th season and The Obelisk Gate. And I don't think that either of these books on their own is like an all-time favorite for me, but they've made it very, very clear to me that N.K. Jemisin is a phenomenal author. Newest fictional crush. So here I'm going to have to stop and chat a bit. I feel like the Booktube circles in which I travel are not particularly focused on fictional crushes or romance, and in fact most of the people who I've seen do this tag so far in my subscription feed have flat out said that they don't get fictional crushes and refuse to answer this question. I cannot truthfully say that because I do in fact get fictional crushes. In fact, I must admit that I get crushes on fictional characters more often by far than I get crushes on real people. But I'm having a hard time answering this question because I feel like the books that I've been reading this year have been far less centered on romantic storylines than maybe the books that I've read in previous years. So I just don't have that wealth of love interest characters to choose from, especially since the most romancy books that I've read this year have all been YA. And the thing with those YA romances is that I am getting old enough that I no longer feel comfortable developing crushes on fictional teen characters. It's like, I'm too old for you, you're underage, this is not gonna happen. But I think I would be lying if I told you straight out that I had 0 new fictional crushes this year. I'm going to get very, very shallow for a moment. Most of the time, if I develop a crush on a fictional character in a book, it will be purely because of their personality traits and not because of what they look like. That's sort of something that happens when you read a book. But I have started reading graphic novels this year. And the graphic novel series Descender has a character in it who happens to look like this. And he's not done much of anything that would endear him to me as a character in terms of, oh, what he's done or how he's behaved. But this year I have discovered that one of the benefits of reading graphic novels is that sometimes you get very handsome men painted in very fetching watercolor. And I think I would be deceiving you if I continued to let you all believe that this was not one of the reasons that I am continuing to read a graphic novel series that I otherwise care very little about. So that was about as shallow as it gets. We're moving on now. Newest favorite character: Arabella Ashby from Arabella of Mars by David D. Levine. The second book in this series, Arabella and the Battle of Venus, is now out. I have it. I've not yet hauled it, but I'm very much looking forward to reading it. Book that made you cry. I very rarely cry at books, so it's actually very surprising to me that I do have one that made me cry in 2017. And that is The Secret Horses of Briar Hill, which I listened to on audiobook. This is a middle grade book. It was short, it was only 5 hours on audio. I listened to the entire thing on a plane flight across the country, and I was in a middle seat between 2 strangers sobbing, and it was wildly embarrassing. I had no idea this book was going to make me cry, but it turned out to be a tearjerker, and I do think that the narrator's performance on the audiobook had something to do with that for me. A book that made you happy. For me, that's going to be A Closed and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers. Favorite book to film adaptation you've seen so far this year? I've actually seen 0 proper book to film adaptations this year. But I am currently watching on Netflix the BBC miniseries of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, and this is a television adaptation, not a film adaptation, and I'm not far enough into it yet to declare whether or not I have any particular opinions on it, but it is a screen adaptation of the book that was already my declared favorite book of the year so far, so I have to mention it. Favorite review you've written so far this year, or in the case of Booktube, favorite video? I am actually going to keep this as favorite review, because saying favorite video would open it up way too far for me, and I'm not sure I could pick one. But if I narrow it down to review videos, I actually have a negative review from earlier this year that I'm very proud of. I joined NetGalley towards the beginning of this year, and the very first book that I got approved for was Sealskin by Sue Bristow, and I gave this 2 out of 5 stars. It was beautifully written, but I came to the conclusion that I had a lot of problems with the way the subject of rape was handled in this book. Basically, I felt like the whole story was a redemption arc for a sad, misunderstood rapist, and I didn't think that that was the sort of Selkie story I wanted to be reading. This is a Selkie story. But this was a book that there were few enough opinions about on the internet at the time that I reviewed it that I felt sort of nervous taking that stand and being the person to articulate the problem that I saw with that book. This isn't a popular book on Booktube or anything, but I've seen it hauled by a couple of people who I respect a lot and who I think are brilliant. And I think the average rating on Goodreads for it is still over the 4.0 mark. But a few months later, I feel like I still stand by that review, and I'm proud of having put it out there on the internet. Most beautiful book you've bought or received so far this year. Graphic novels sort of, I feel like, win out in terms of physical, beautiful books kind of automatically. I have The 100 Nights of Hero by Isabel Greenberg, which is, you know, large and gorgeously produced. It's of course got, you know, fabulous artwork all throughout and lovely end papers, but it's probably not anywhere near my favorite cover design of a book. So if we're just going by like favorite cover design of a book you've bought so far this year as opposed to physically produced book, I think I would go with Of Sorrow and Such by Angela Slater. This has cover art by Anna and Elena Balbuso, whose fantasy art I consistently really admire. I'm going to show it up a little closer so that you can see it. It's just absolutely lovely. And number 15, the final question, what books do you want to read by the end of the year? I've also been tagged in the TBR tag video, which I'm hopefully going to do very soon, and which I'm going to have to try and explain my TBR system because it's very complicated and it doesn't make a lot of logical sense, but like it makes sense to me. But I'm going to refer you first to my August TBR video, which are all books that I'm planning on reading this month, or if not, the beginning of September. I also posted a few months ago a top 5 SFF books you want to read video that was one of the Booktube SFF babbles. And from that video, I still have left to get to The Starlit Wood, which is an anthology of fairy tale retellings, and Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. I've committed myself to getting through those by the end of the year. In addition, I've compiled a bit of a list here of some of the books that I can pretty much guarantee you I will get through by the end of the year. So I have A Face Like Glass by Frances Harding, Soulless by Gail Carriger, Among Others by Jo Walton, Of Sorrow and Such by Angela Slater again, Pretty Monsters by Kelly Link, Castle Hangnail by Ursula Vernon, The Tropic of Serpents by Marie Brennan, The Onion Girl by Charles DeLint, The Boy Who Lost Fairyland by Catherine M. Valenti, and Jane Steele by Lindsay Fay. And that's it for me for the mid-year book Freakout tag. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I am not going to tag anyone in this one because I feel like it's kind of at the beginning of August here, the end of the window for doing this tag. If you wanted to do it, now is the time. Go do it. No more waiting to be tagged for you. But for the rest of the tags that I'm hoping to film sometime soon, I do plan on tagging people. Anyhow, I hope you're having a nice day. That is all. Bye for now.